My dear members of this chamber, over the past 2 years, we have seen COVID-19 pandemic change our world. Millions have died and lost their jobs and have their lives upended by the catastrophe. Despite these struggles, we have seen heroes step up and put themselves on the front lines in order to serve the lives of others. We owe everyone in the medical field and community our thanks for their work in stemming the tide of the pandemic, from doctors, nurses, practitioners, hospital staff, medical researchers, epidemiologists. I think we can all agree that the frontline workers are the true heroes of this pandemic. And while we are all thankful for their tireless efforts, that has not always been the case for some who have dedicated themselves to the healing arts. That is why today, for a moment in Black history, I'd like to highlight a few people who have dedicated their lives to helping others, despite the hardships that they face along the way. First, I want to speak about a doctor who made his mark early in the 19th century, Dr. James McCune Smith. Dr. Smith's mother purchased her own freedom, and according to records, it is believed that his father was either a freed slave or a white merchant. This doctor showed true promise at an early age, and in fact, when General Lafayette came back to this nation for a tour, he ran into Dr. Smith at the age of 11 years old, and he noticed that he was a very talented young man, and he offered and asked that he write and do a welcoming speech at the American Free School where he visited. But despite his brilliance, Dr. Smith was rejected from several medical schools here in this country. And so he was forced to search elsewhere where he could have an education, and found himself in Scotland. In 1837, Dr. Smith returned to New York City, where he opened a medical office and pharmacy. There he operated one of the few interracial medical offices in the city, treating Black and white patients. His excellence was not confined to just his medical office. Dr. Smith was also an abolitionist and held meetings with other abolitionists, including Frederick Douglass, to discuss strategies to end slavery. Together, they established the National Council of Colored People. Now I want to move a little bit forward to the early 19th century to talk about Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, who became the first Black woman in the nation to receive a medical degree. And it seems that she was destined to be a doctor because she was raised by an aunt who provided medical care for sick neighbors. And that left an impression on her, and she knew that she wanted to relieve the suffering of others. She began her medical career as a nurse, and then when she was accepted to the New England Female Medical College, she was the only Black person in the program at the time. Now, at the time, this medical college was the only one that would accept women because it was thought that women were either too delicate or not intelligent enough to study science and discuss the human body. After completing her studies at that school, she became the first Black woman again to hold formally a medical degree in the United States. To put it in perspective, think about this. At that time, there were over 54,000 physicians. That number surprised me, but at the time we were looking at the Civil War, and so there were a lot of people practicing medicine. Only 300 of them were women, and Dr. Crumpler was the only Black woman. She remained in Boston post-graduation to practice medicine, where she cared primarily for poor Black women and children. But after the Civil War ended, she moved here to Richmond, Virginia, to continue her practice. She faced some obstacles, but she pursued on. She actually gave an interview, and she said about Richmond, during her stay here, nearly every hour was improved in the sphere of labor. The last quarter of the year 1866, I was enabled, she says, to have access each day to a very large number of the indigent and others in different classes, in a population of over 30,000. Even during that time, when she was serving so many, she faced intense racism by other physicians and the administrator of the Freedmen's Bureau. Some pharmacists refused to fill her prescriptions, and then others heckled her, saying that the MD behind her name stood for mule driver. But she was resilient, knowing that her calling was not to respond to worry about those who sought to discourage her, but her calling was to serve the sick and those in need. She would offer her medical expertise to patients regardless of their ability to pay. And today, on March 30th, in Virginia, we do celebrate her trailblazing accomplishments with the Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler Day. I want to move ahead now to the early part of the 20th century to talk about another Black doctor who is also a woman. She is distinct and special because she was the first woman to perform open heart surgery. Her name is Dr. Adele Logan, and she was the first woman, but the only 9 surgeries of open heart had happened, and she was one of them. Her expertise was not limited to cardiology. She developed antibiotics. She also pioneered efforts to detect differences in tissue and breast density so we can have early detection of breast cancer. And now I'm going to advance to today, and I started off talking about the pandemic that we're in. And there is a young doctor on December 31st, 2019, and she's a PhD doctor. She got an email saying, "Get ready for 2020. Are you ready?" And her name is Dr. Kismia Corbett. I don't know if you all have heard of her, but you probably have heard of the Moderna vaccine. She is the one who led the efforts to create that vaccine at NIH. And she did this at the ripe age of 34. This young Black woman is the reason that many lives have been saved or have not been able to survive the virus. And I'm so excited about her, Mr. Speaker, because, again, sometimes we have to see to believe. And I want everyone, no matter your race, to look at Dr. Corbett, such a young age, to lead the efforts and be the one who is credited with the Moderna vaccine. I know, Mr. Speaker, some of our parents who are elderly got the Moderna vaccine because it is considered one of the most effective and safest that's given. 34 years old. And this pandemic has taught us, and sort of laid bare, as we always say, what we have seen in our society, that we have a shortage of doctors, physical therapists, pulmonologists, the list goes on and on. So any young person, hopefully, who hears this today, and those pages sitting up front, you probably want to come into the political field or something like that. But if not, I do encourage you to look at the healing arts, because when you look at the 4 people that I discussed, they faced obstacles and they pursued on, and they actually helped people and heal their bodies and heal their lives. And I think it's so special, and I'm glad, Mr. Speaker, that I had this opportunity to share this moment in Black history. Thank you.